My family took my hard-earned savings for a wedding. I said no when they asked for more. They locked me out. 6 months later, karma hit them hard. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This channel is all about sharing stories that are inspired by real-life situations and ideas found on Reddit, covering topics like family, friendships, and life's challenges. Today's story is about a woman who, after years of being taken for granted by her family, finally reaches her breaking point. Have you ever felt like you've been giving everything to others only to be left empty-handed and unappreciated? Stick with me until the end to see how the character learns to take control of her life and reclaim her independence. And if you enjoy this story, I'd really appreciate it if you could help me reach 1,000 subscribers to keep bringing more stories to inspire and motivate us all. I've always felt like the ghost of my family, like a shadow that walked beside them, never really part of the picture. My name's Sienna and I'm the eldest of 3 kids. On the surface, we looked like a perfect family. We lived in a big house in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. The house had everything: a manicured front yard, a white picket fence, and an antique tire swing hanging from the oak tree. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. Whether it was schoolwork, chores, or helping take care of my younger siblings, I was always the one who was there. But somehow, nothing I did was ever enough. My sister Layla, who was 2 years younger, was the shining star. Everything she did seemed to get applause. If she tripped during her ballet recital, Mom would throw her a party to cheer her up. But when I won the regional science fair, all I got was a pat on the back and a good job. I told myself it didn't matter, but deep down, I always wondered why my efforts never seemed to matter. High school was no different. I worked my ass off to get into a good college, studying late nights, tutoring other students, and skipping out on most social activities to save up money for tuition. By the time I graduated, I had an acceptance letter to a top university in California and a decent savings account. My parents didn't exactly throw me a party for getting in. But my younger brother Eli had his own celebratory dinner for getting a new gaming console. I remember sitting at the table, trying not to show the sting in my chest. I had always been the one who took the back seat. But when I left for college, I thought things would change. I thought I'd finally escape the silent neglect, the constant comparison, the feeling of being second best. But the further I moved away from my hometown, the more I realized that no matter how far I went, I was always going to be that invisible figure. My achievements were nothing compared to Layla's. No matter how much I worked, how much I sacrificed, it would always be her who got the spotlight. When I landed my first full-time job as a marketing analyst right out of college, I thought things were finally starting to look up. I had a steady paycheck, an apartment I could call my own, and a future that felt promising. It was everything I had worked for during those years of sleepless nights and overextended hours in college. After years of struggling with self-doubt and familial expectations, I had made it. I was on my own, finally independent, and in control of my life. Or so I thought. First, the calls from home were few and far between. I didn't mind. They were just checking in, asking about my new job, the city, the usual. But soon enough, those calls became more frequent, with each one beginning with a soft, almost hesitant tone from my mom or dad. "Hey, honey, we need to talk about something." And it wasn't long before I started feeling that familiar, subtle pressure. The kind of pressure you don't even realize is building until it becomes overwhelming. I was already tired, working full-time in a fast-paced office environment, learning to navigate the corporate world while keeping up with my responsibilities at home was exhausting. But I was making it work. Or at least I thought I was. I was still pushing through the stress, thinking that it was just a phase, that I just needed to keep my head down, and soon everything would align. Then one weekend, my dad called. His voice was lighter than usual, but there was a hint of urgency to it that I couldn't ignore. "Hey, Sienna, we're taking a trip to the lake with Layla. Can you send over $500? We're a little short." I remember the immediate wave of irritation that washed over me. My mind raced. Why don't they just save up themselves? I thought. It wasn't like they didn't have the money. They both worked. They were perfectly capable of budgeting. But instead, it always seemed like they turned to me whenever they were a little bit short. They knew I was the one who always stepped up. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or cold. They were my family after all. So I sent the money, telling myself that it was just a one-off thing. A small favor. No big deal. Just this once. Months went by and I didn't think much of it. The days blurred together in the routine of work and life. I was still settling into my new apartment, adjusting to the balance of being financially independent while keeping up with the endless demands at work. I was tired, but I felt proud. I had accomplished something on my own for once. Then, one day I checked my bank account and froze. My heart sank as I scrolled through my recent transactions. The money I had saved for a down payment on a car, something that would finally give me the freedom I had dreamed about for so long, was gone. I stared at the screen, feeling like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Gone. All of it. I couldn't even bring myself to look at my savings account balance for a full minute. Not only that, but when I called my dad to ask when he would pay me back, his response was casual, almost dismissive. "It's just money, Sienna. Don't worry about it," he said, as though it were no big deal. I wanted to scream. I had scrimped and saved for that money. I had worked 2 jobs during college, barely scraped by with instant ramen dinners, and sacrificed so much to build up even that small amount. It wasn't just money, it was my future, my independence, and now it was gone, just like that, without a second thought. But I didn't scream. I didn't say anything. Instead, I quietly hung up the phone, my hands shaking, my stomach a mess of conflicting emotions. I was angry, hurt, confused, but most of all, I was disappointed. Disappointed in myself for not standing up sooner. Disappointed that my own parents thought it was okay to take from me without even asking, without considering the consequences. In the days that followed, I tried to push it out of my mind. I continued to send them money when they asked, even though it was never returned. They asked for this or that, a few $100s for a last-minute repair, some money to help cover unexpected expenses, and I would send it. Every time, each request felt like another layer of pressure, another weight added to the stack of things I was expected to do. But I kept doing it because that's what I had always done. I had always been the one they turned to when things went wrong. When life got too difficult, I kept telling myself that it was okay, that this was what family did. They needed me and I couldn't say no. After all, I had always been the reliable one, the responsible one. I was the safe bet. They knew I would help. I had always put them first and I would continue to do so. That's what family did, right? But deep down, I started to lose hope. It felt like no matter how much I gave, no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. I was still invisible to them. My achievements didn't matter. They saw me as their backup plan, their safety net, the one they turned to when everything else fell apart. I wasn't their daughter, I was just a resource, a tool they used when they needed something fixed. I had been their emotional support, their financial support, and the one who always made sure things were taken care of. But it never felt like they were there for me in return. I watched Layla, my younger sister, get everything handed to her. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was the way my parents treated her, like the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. They paid for her college tuition, her expensive clothes, her constant shopping sprees. They even bought her a new car when she graduated high school. It was like she could do no wrong. And I was just there. My accomplishments, my sacrifices were invisible. They never seemed to notice or care. And then it hit me one day as I sat in my small apartment, staring at the walls, trying to make sense of it all. Nothing I did ever mattered to them. I was always second best. The quiet, hardworking older sister who could be counted on when they needed something, but never really seen or heard. It was exhausting, trying to prove myself to people who would never truly see me. And it wasn't just my parents. It was the entire dynamic that had been set up. I had spent my entire life chasing validation, trying to earn a place at the table. But now I realized I had been playing a game I couldn't win. They would never change. They would always see me as the backup, the one they leaned on but never appreciated. The thought of it all was suffocating. But still, I kept quiet. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to create tension. After all, they were my family, and family always came first, right? It wasn't until much later that I realized. Sometimes you have to stop giving when you're being drained. You have to stop being the one who's always there for everyone else and start being there for yourself. I just hadn't learned that yet. A few months later, I was sitting at my desk working on a campaign strategy for one of our clients when my phone buzzed. It was a call from my mom. I hesitated for a moment before picking up, already knowing this wouldn't be a casual check-in. "Sienna, we need your help," she said, her voice higher pitched than usual, laced with urgency. "Layla's wedding is coming up and we've hit a snag. We need to borrow some money to cover the catering costs. We're short $5,000. My chest tightened. $5,000. My first reaction was to slam the phone down, to scream, to let her know how unfair this was, how unfair everything had been for years. But I didn't. I took a deep breath instead, the weight of the words pressing heavily on my chest. The years of feeling invisible, used, and overlooked started to rush back, but I fought it back. I couldn't lose my cool. Not now. "Why me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But I felt the frustration slipping through my words. Her response was calm, as if she didn't sense the growing storm inside me. "It's for family, Sienna. You'll understand when you see how beautiful it's going to be. Layla deserves the best. Layla, the golden child. My sister. The one who always seemed to get everything handed to her on a silver platter without lifting a finger. The one who, after dropping out of college without a second thought, was now getting a $20,000 wedding because, as my parents put it, it's her time. My parents were willing to pour their savings into this extravagant wedding for her, even though they could barely afford it. And there I was on the other side, knowing that I had been the one who worked tirelessly for every single dollar I had. Every hour I had spent, every sacrifice I made, was now being swallowed up into Layla's fairy tale. And it wasn't the first time. I had scrimped and saved for years. I didn't live the lavish college life my friends had. I worked 2 jobs while studying, skipped the nights out, the fancy dinners, the little luxuries, all so that I could build a future for myself. So that one day I could buy a car, get my own place, and not feel like I was constantly scrambling. And yet here I was, giving up my hard-earned savings so that my sister could have her perfect day. Again, I sent the money. What else could I do? I wasn't going to make a scene, not now, not in front of her. But as the words, "It's for family, Sienna," echoed in my mind, something inside me snapped. I was the backup, always had been, the reliable one, the one they turned to when they needed something fixed. My entire life had been a series of silent sacrifices. And this was the tipping point. Layla's wedding day arrived. And of course I went. It was everything they promised it would be. A massive event. 300 guests. A live band. A glittering banquet hall. Everything was pristine. Everything was designed to show off the family's success and their ability to throw a grand celebration. Layla looked like a princess, stunning in her designer dress as she walked down the aisle. And my parents, my mom especially, couldn't stop fawning over her. Every moment, every gesture was a celebration of her. She was glowing. As I stood at the back of the room, holding a glass of wine I wasn't even sure I wanted to drink, I watched them. I watched my parents gush about how perfect everything was, how Layla deserved every ounce of it. But I couldn't bring myself to join them. I was there physically, but emotionally, I was somewhere else. Somewhere distant, far from the laughter, the music, and the endless compliments being heaped onto Layla. I couldn't even bring myself to get a good look at her. I didn't want to see her basking in all the attention, knowing that none of it had anything to do with the years of work I had put in. Not just for this wedding, no, it was for everything. Every tiny victory, every small win that went unnoticed. Every hour I spent working to make something of myself while everyone else got to take the easy road. It felt like a cruel joke. I wasn't even allowed to take a moment to enjoy the event myself. I wasn't allowed to feel proud, to feel like I had been part of this grand celebration. Instead, I stood at the edge watching them parade Layla as the star, watching my mother glow with pride over her baby girl. And all I could feel was the sharp sting of the years of unacknowledged sacrifices, the silent hours, the exhaustion that had built up from carrying the weight of expectations that weren't my own. I thought back to all the things I had given up: relationships, my time, my health, even some of my happiness, because I had always been the one expected to help, the one expected to clean up the messes. I worked endlessly so I could finally, one day, afford to be free. And now, that dream was slipping away, consumed by a wedding that wasn't even mine. All I had ever wanted was a moment of recognition. A moment where someone looked at me and saw not just the person who did the hard work, but the person who deserved to be celebrated too. But that wasn't going to happen here. Not today. That was the moment it all clicked. The final piece of the puzzle. I wasn't going to keep giving and giving without receiving anything in return. The emotional toll it had taken on me over the years had finally caught up to me. The years of being invisible. The years of working hard for the approval of people who would never truly see me. The years of being the backup and not the priority. It was enough. I wasn't going to keep silently sacrificing my happiness, my future, my peace for people who didn't even notice. No more. I couldn't do it. I had given so much of myself to this family, to their dreams, to their expectations. And where had it gotten me? Stuck in the corner of a ballroom. Feeling like a stranger in my own life. No more. It was time to change things. It was time to stop living for others, stop living for their approval. It was time to take control of my life. I wasn't going to continue being the one they leaned on when they needed something fixed. I wasn't going to keep sacrificing for a family that didn't understand what I was giving up in the process. I had to do it for me, and that's when I knew, for the first time in a long time, that I had to put myself first. Knock knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story, but before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. After the wedding, I felt numb. The numbness wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. For weeks, I walked around in a haze, going through the motions of life without feeling like I was truly living. The weight of everything, years of sacrifice, years of feeling invisible and unimportant to my family finally caught up with me. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't keep giving, keep sacrificing for a family that didn't even see me as a person but as a source of funding. It was as though everything had led up to that moment. The years of being the one they called when they needed something, the years of being overlooked for every achievement, every success. Every time I was passed over, it built a little more bitterness inside of me, a little more sadness, and a little more resignation. But after the wedding, after giving up my savings for something that didn't even have my name on it, I realized I couldn't continue to live this way. I started distancing myself. At first, it was small things, less frequent phone calls, shorter responses when they asked me for things. I began to realize that I didn't owe them anymore. It felt strange at first to stop answering the phone when they called. My mind would race, wondering what they needed, but I forced myself not to pick up. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I wasn't going to be the person they leaned on every time something went wrong. I stopped giving them money, too. And when they asked for more, I said no. It was liberating at first. I felt a sense of control, like I had taken back a part of myself that I had lost over the years. I had always been the reliable one. The one they counted on, the one who always said yes. But not anymore. I had spent too many years being used, too many years being the backup plan, the emergency fund. I was tired of being invisible. But then, one evening, everything exploded. I came home from work to find a note taped to my door. My stomach dropped as I read the words. You need to pay us $1,800 for Layla's honeymoon. If not, don't bother coming back. The moment the note registered in my mind, I felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath me. It was like a slap to the face, cold and unforgiving. I stood there on my porch, staring at the paper, my hand trembling as I held it. The tears welled up in my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall. I needed to stay strong, but all I could feel was the sting of betrayal. All those years, all those sacrifices, and this was the thanks I got? I was speechless. How could they treat me like this? How could they demand more from me after everything I had already given? After everything they had already taken? It was the first time in my life that I was locked out of my own home. I had worked so hard for this apartment, for my independence, and yet here I was, standing outside holding a note that made it clear I wasn't welcome. I was nothing more than an ATM to them. I stood there for what felt like hours, the rain starting to fall lightly. Just enough to make the moment even more surreal. I felt the weight of all my decisions crashing down on me. Was this really who I had become? The person who was never seen as enough unless I was giving something? The person who had been walked all over for so long? I was angry, but underneath that anger was something else, something deeper. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of defiance. I was done. Done being the one who always said yes. Done being the one who was expected to sacrifice everything for the sake of family. For the sake of people who couldn't even show me the smallest amount of gratitude. I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. I wasn't going to let them continue to walk all over me. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking. I dialed Chloe's number, my best friend, the only person who had been there for me when it all seemed like too much to bear. Chloe had always been the voice of reason, the one who told me that I was worth more than the way my family treated me. I didn't know if I could explain what had just happened, but I knew I needed her more than I ever had. She picked up on the second ring. "Sienna, hey, what's up?" Her voice was light, but I could hear the concern in it when she caught the tone of my silence. I need help," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do." I could hear Chloe's breath catch on the other end of the line. "What happened?" she asked gently. I told her everything. The wedding, the money, the note on the door. The years of sacrifice that had led to this moment. I told her how I had always been the one to give, the one to put everyone else's needs above my own. But now I was done. I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't keep letting them take from me. Chloe was silent for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice steady and strong. "Sienna, you have to stop letting them use you. You deserve so much more than this. You've worked so hard for everything you have. And you're not obligated to keep giving just because they want you to. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to take care of yourself." Her words hit me like a revelation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. Like I wasn't the only one who could see how wrong this all was. Chloe reminded me of my worth, of the things I had worked so hard to achieve. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the years I had spent feeling like I was nothing more than a tool for others to use. It was about the fact that I had lost myself in trying to meet other people's expectations. I took a deep breath and wiped the tears that had started to fall. "You're right," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. "I've been letting them treat me like this for so long, but I don't have to anymore. I can stand up for myself. I can say no. I'm done being their backup plan." The sound of Chloe's relieved sigh on the other end of the line made me feel like I was finally seeing the light at the end of a very long tunnel. "I'm proud of you, Sienna," she said softly. "It's about time you put yourself first." For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life. It wasn't easy. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to keep living like this. I wasn't going to keep being the person who only mattered when I was giving something. I had my own life to live, and it was time to start living it for myself. As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I didn't know what I would do next, but for the first time I felt empowered. I wasn't going to follow their rules anymore. I was going to make my own path. And that right there was my final break. The days that followed were a blur, a whirlwind of emotions that I could hardly keep up with. Moving out of my parents' house for good felt like both a relief and a weight on my chest. I remember packing my things in boxes, feeling a strange combination of freedom and sorrow. I had spent years in that house, years of being the reliable one, the go-to person for every crisis, the one who was expected to always give and never ask for anything in return. Leaving that behind was both liberating and terrifying. I found a small, affordable apartment in the city, a place that felt like mine in every sense of the word. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, but it had my touch. Felt like a fresh start. I could finally breathe. But as soon as I settled in, the guilt crept in. Leaving my family behind wasn't easy. The weight of my decision pressed down on me. I had always been the glue that held us together, or at least, that's what I'd convinced myself of. How could I walk away from them? How could I leave when they still needed me? I spent nights lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making a mistake. But every day I spent in my new apartment, I felt a little more like myself. First, it was small things: enjoying the silence, having the freedom to decide how I spent my evenings, not feeling like I was constantly walking on eggshells. I started cooking for myself, experimenting with recipes I had never tried before. The simple act of cooking felt like reclaiming a part of my identity I had lost over the years. I was no longer living for everyone else. I was living for me. I began to do things I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. Picking up books I had left unread for too long, spending weekends hiking alone in the nearby hills, rediscovering passions I had buried beneath years of being the family fixer. The guilt still lingered, but it began to fade. The more I immersed myself in this new life, the less I felt like a backup plan. I was no longer the person who existed only to fix problems and solve crises. I was Sienna, just Sienna, and I was learning to be proud of that. But the phone call came a year later. I wasn't expecting it. To be honest, I had almost forgotten what it felt like to hear from them. The number on the screen was familiar, and for a moment, I hesitated. I had spent the last year building this new life, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to re-enter that world again. But I answered anyway. "Sienna, it's Mom," she said. Her voice sounding just as I remembered, calm, steady, but with an edge of urgency. "We need your help." My heart sank. My mind immediately went to that familiar place, where I knew exactly what she wanted: money. It had been the same cycle over and over again. I braced myself for the request, but I didn't expect what came next. "Layla wants to start her own boutique," Mom continued. "We've hit a bit of a financial roadblock. Would you be willing to help her out?" I paused, the words hanging in the air. Layla? My sister who had never truly had to work for anything? The one who dropped out of college, spent money freely, and was always the center of attention? And now she wanted to start a boutique with my help? I could feel the anger rising in me, the sense of betrayal, the overwhelming frustration that had been building for years. But this time, I wasn't that person anymore. This time, I wasn't the one who would just give in. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and spoke. "If you want money, you can have it, but it will be on my terms, not yours." The words felt powerful as I said them, each one an affirmation of my newfound strength. "I'm not your ATM anymore. You can't just take from me whenever you want." The silence on the other end of the line was thick, and I could almost hear my mom's surprise. She was used to me saying yes. She was used to me being the one who gave without question. But not anymore. "Mom," I said, my voice firm. "I've worked hard for everything I have. I'm not going to just give it away because you ask. If Layla wants to start a business, she can do it on her own, or she can ask for help from someone else." There was a pause, and then she sighed. "I understand," she said, though I could tell she didn't really. She wasn't used to hearing no from me. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had betrayed them. I didn't feel like I had done something wrong by setting boundaries. I felt free. In that moment, I realized something powerful. I am not defined by what others take from me. I define who I am, and I will never be anyone's backup plan again. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the years I had spent sacrificing my own happiness, my own well-being, and my own sense of self for a family that didn't appreciate it. It was about finally realizing that I wasn't just a resource for them to dip into when they needed something. I was a person with my own dreams, my own needs, and my own limits. The weight that had been hanging over me for so long of being the one who was always expected to give, to fix, to sacrifice had finally lifted. And with it, I felt a sense of power that I hadn't known I had. I had taken control of my life, and for the first time, I felt like I was living for myself, not for anyone else. The phone call from my mom was a moment of clarity. It was a reminder that I had come so far, but it also showed me how much further I still had to go. I had set boundaries, but I needed to stick to them. The path forward was mine to create, and I wasn't going to let anyone dictate it for me again. I wasn't going to let anyone control my life, my choices, or my happiness. This was just the beginning. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be times when I would be tempted to go back to old habits, to give in and say yes when I wanted to say no. But I knew now that I had the power to choose. I could choose my path. I could choose my life. And I was going to make it count. As I sat in my small apartment that evening, looking out over the city skyline, I felt a sense of peace I had never known before. I was no longer the backup plan. I was Sienna, and I was ready to live for myself, unapologetically. What do you think about this story? Feel free to share your thoughts, reflections, or any feedback in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you can be the first to hear about the next story coming your way. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end of this journey. And I truly appreciate your support. Stay tuned for more stories that I hope will continue to inspire and resonate with you.